Hello and welcome to the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Products and Services here at Alpha Software. I'm joined today by Sarah Mitchell, who's in charge of our documentation department, and we will be joined shortly, we believe, by Dion McCormick, who is actually putting on the presentation. Of course, we're here also to answer your questions, and you can type those questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. So you might want to type those questions in now while we have a quick look for our host. We'll be right back. Thank you. One thing I'm sure Dion is going to tell you about, actually Sarah's here, might be able to tell you a little bit about it, is that we have got a new version of Alpha Anywhere. Just came out yesterday with a bunch of cool new features, which I know Sarah is furiously documenting and blogging about. Sarah, do you want to mention a couple of those new features that are in the new release?
Oh, certainly. Yeah, I can
Great.
totally do that.
Awesome.
There is two things that I want to mention that's going to impact anybody who's been an existing user and moving forward. First, we have a brand new installer. I personally love the new installer. You can install all of our products with one installer now, and it gets all the new updates in it, so you don't have to go download anything. So that's a really convenient tool to have. Definitely check it out. It makes it easy to manage all your installs. And the other thing is that we have now officially created a timeline for ending support for certain Windows operating systems. This is so that we can continue to move forward and make Alpha Anywhere the cutting edge technology that it is. So any of you that, if you're running Alpha on Windows 8, 8.1, you're using Windows Server 2012, 2012 R2, you'll want to go check out this support schedule. I know on January 1st, we're officially ending support for Windows Server 2008 R2. So if you want to keep using Alpha on future systems, we strongly recommend that you upgrade. Our goal is to get everyone up to, well, our goal is to get to the point where the minimum that we're supporting is Windows Server 2016. So if you're going to upgrade, I recommend that one as a minimum, or Windows Server 2019 if you have access to that as well. So check that out.
Someone had asked before, that doesn't mean that Alpha is going to suddenly magically stop working on those operating systems, right? I don't think we're going to put in a gate, but it just means that we can't provide technical support to you if you say, look, I'm running on Windows 2008 server or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, we won't support it, and we're not going to test our products on them.
Right.
So as like when we ended support for Windows 7, eventually the product will just stop working because the underlying
we're going to come up with features. Exactly.
Yeah.
We're going to come up with features.
Yeah, we're moving forward. We want to use the new stuff that Microsoft is developing, and a lot of that isn't compatible with older operating systems.
Yeah, great. Awesome. Yeah. Well, it looks like Dion has joined us. Hello, Dion. Are you there?
Unmuted, and I am here. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you perfectly well, and I'm pretty excited because I think today you are going to carry on with your API discussion, if I'm correct about that.
Yes. Keep an eye on my audio quality. I'm on a very slow network today, and I apologize to everybody for that. No fun, but so hopefully we'll be good there. But yeah, we're ready to go.
Do you want to maybe call in on it? Can you call in on a telephone? Would that be possible?
Oh, that's a great idea. Let me get hold on a second. Yeah, let's try that. We'll see.
And then after that, we can try telegraph after that, you know, if people are good at Morse code.
Okay, I'll be right back with a phone call.
Thanks, Dion. That's cool. So one of the other features in there is the ability to freeze columns in place, which I think is pretty neat.
In your lists, yeah.
In your UX lists, which gives it kind of like a spreadsheet-like feel. So more and more you can do so many cool things to the list.
Yeah, we also have a brand new set of containers available. They're called card containers, and they allow you to add animated transitions between sections of content in your app. So you'll definitely want to check that out as well.
Oh, those look really cool. Yeah. They show off really nicely if you want to build an interface to impress.
Hey.
All right, I see Dion is there. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm coming through. I know the audio quality is not going to be great because I'm on my phone, but we'll see how far we go.
But it is not choppy, and we can hear every word, so that's pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, I will put a little estimate. So excellent. Well, I'm ready to share my screen. I'm ready to share.
Excellent. I'll make you the presenter.
Okay. going to have to go slow on my mouse so I don't overwhelm the system. But you
All
should be
right,
seeing
that's
my
fair.
tech
And I
build.
am seeing your screen. Alpha Anywhere API
Awesome.
technology.
Well, hey, I'm going to kick up my feet here since I'm on my phone, and wanted to say thank you everybody for, as finally in Texas, a winter has arrived. It actually froze, so it's proof that hell does freeze over if you give it enough time and lay enough in the system. But anyway, thank you everybody for joining us. I hope everybody had a fabulous, absolutely fabulous Thanksgiving. I hope everybody did their assigned homework and watched the last presentation, because I'm going to build on that today. And you will be graded and tested. There's no math, but there is testing going on today. No, we really appreciate it. If you did miss that, send us an email at guides@alphasoftware where we send out that link. Basically, we pre-recorded it so that people, when they're bored, don't want to talk to their relatives, could watch my boring presentation, versus NFL or anything like that.
Or better yet, get your relatives to watch. That's what we were kind of going for, I think. Yeah. So,
that will get them out of the house very quickly.
Exactly. Turn off the game. Yeah.
Let's bring it up on AirPlay on the big TV and turn off the game. But thank you, everybody. We're going to extend our discussion on the Alpha Anywhere API technology. This is our third session. Our first session, we focused on the basics of creating an API using Alpha, i.e. exposing an API. In our case, it was a fairly straightforward demo of basically a query into a database that would generate text or a set of customer records and send it out. And, showed how the cool thing about it is Alpha's doing a lot of heavy lifting for you. You just need to kind of understand the structure, and we'll do a little quick recap on that today. Then last week, we talked about how you could then lock down and secure your API, meaning how you could add authentication to your API, which is critical because obviously every day you hear about a security breach there. You're going to want to protect your information and your valuable information in your system, and you'll need to do that through authentication methods. Today, we're going to talk about an equivalent sort of security topic, which is basically auditing your API and having the ability to have the API automatically record who is sending information in and getting that done. And what's interesting, it uses the same basic design pattern as the authentication we covered last week, but in this case, it's just focused on recording that data. I'm going to walk you through that today, and we're going to build on what we did last week. As always, the GoToWebinar control panel has a questions area. Please put your questions in there. The team will be more than glad to review, and we'll answer as many as we can today. If we can't, we'll get back to you. And also, if you have other topics beyond this you'd like to talk about, put those in there. And always, please send in stuff to guides@alphasoftware.com for topics you'd like to cover. We love that information. We try to use that as our source material. In fact, this whole API series came off a few questions that came in on that, so we decided to do a little recap and coming along there. And also, just a real quick news before we dive into the presentation part, we do have a new release coming. The current capabilities in the pre-release, things like the new PDF viewer, the new awesome card controls that are built into the container controls, which I will be doing a demonstration on very soon, is coming in that release. So keep an eye out, a new production release, and it should be really nice. Really a lot of testing going on and nice and solid, and can't wait to have that. And remember there's...
Dion, can I break in with a customer question? Someone said, all right, the new features sound cool, but is this available in the community edition, the free edition? And the answer is the new features? Absolutely.
I'll let you answer that.
Absolutely. Yeah, you certainly, they are. All the features are available in the community edition, so we're not holding anything back from it. So if you want to check them out and you don't have the full developer, check them out in the community edition. Thanks. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't. No. I appreciate that because that's a really good question. I answered my question there. You'll notice we didn't call it Alpha Anywhere Lite or something like that, with LITE. No, the community edition is the full boat in terms of the capabilities of the development environment, what you can do, and all the features. In terms of actual implementation deployment, that's a different animal. But a community edition, definitely you can experiment and play with all these capabilities here. By the way, we will be doing a deeper dive on the new installer. It's really nice. It is so cool, and I'm using it a lot these days. It makes life very simple. It's basically a single installer. Once you have it on your machine, you're good to go. You can download and install stuff. It manages for certain pieces. We're going to do a little deeper dive on that soon, and it just makes things really much simpler. But as always, we want to say, if you're using a pre-release, obviously be careful, not meant for production. And the other thing that's super important is that if you are trying and experimenting with the pre-release, which we want you to do, we want you to kind of get ahead of the curve from that standpoint. Be very careful that, remember, your development environment and your server environment always need to stay in sync. Because if you were using a older server and a newer development environment you published, things may not go the way you want it. In fact, it always reminds me of Ghostbusters when he goes like, don't cross the streams because some bad things will happen. And so always make sure you're very careful. I actually have a separate virtual machine that I use just for all the pre-release stuff. That way I make sure I don't accidentally do something to hurt any of my production releases and things like that. But we want you and encourage you to use those pre-releases to check out the new features, get ahead of the curve. They're just really fun, and there's a lot of cool stuff in that. So want to do a real quick recap. So when you're creating the API, the core of the API system is the Xbasic class. That's where your code that actually generates what needs to go back to the end user or whoever called that API is done. And we're going to expand on that. If you watched the presentation last week, the authentication kind of code is in Xbasic classes. And today we'll cover that even a little bit more from there. But what happens is Alpha takes that Xbasic class, uses the web service class generator, and wraps it into web service. So it's basically putting a wrapper around your classes. And that wrapper does a lot of the heavy lifting for you in terms of understanding how to receive information, how to pass it to the class, how to get the information back and present it. It also does all the work of making sure that it conforms with industry standards. So if you're using tools like curl or Postman or any orchestration API tool, it just looks like an industry standard API. So it's really nice, and it's done all in an automation fashion. And it creates test pages and test APIs and other things that make your life a lot easier there. When it's actually out in the wild, the person calls in the application server routes that to your web service. The web service then says, oh, I'm going to go call the Xbasic class. If there's authentication, it runs over and does that authentication before it actually lets you go down to the core Xbasic class and then returns all that information back. And again, we use industry standard protocols like 200 for an OK request, 401 for an incorrect request, etc. So anybody from the outside world using an Alpha API, it's just going to look like the rest of the world, which is really nice because then it allows you to kind of leverage outside resources and capabilities from there. So when we talked about authentication, we used that same structure, but we created what was basically an authentication Xbasic class so that when the person called in, the first thing that happened is the web service said, oh, this particular web service and the class underneath it are secure. So I need to authenticate that person. And what's neat about this is that it automatically handles that, oh, are you authenticated or not? Yes or no. Does all that stuff for you. But the really cool thing is it allows you to create your own sort of special sauce of how you want to authenticate the information or the user. So you can use any number of different ways. Basically, it calls an Xbasic class function, and in there, it gives you the information the person sent, like their token or API token or whatever you want to call it. And then what's neat about it is then you can look that up in a database. You could run a encryption algorithm. You could do any number of things because it's just Xbasic in there. So there's a little coding there, but it's not very complex. And again, the presentation last week went over all that from there. Now, today we're going to talk about auditing, and it works essentially the same way, is that when it comes to the application server and goes to the web service, we now also have, and I'll just go ahead and make it real time right here, we have our audit Xbasic class, and the system will automatically call that class and do the information or record the information for you automatically. And this is very critical, and this is actually one of the coolest features kind of behind the scenes. And let me explain why. One, it's a great tool for security, meaning that it's not only one thing to let people in your system, but you kind of want to know who is in the system, how many times they're going, because that can provide you some really critical information in terms of how people are using your system. The other thing, which is very exciting, which is very cool, is in certain applications, specifically things like medical HIPAA applications and other applications, you need to create a record of who sees records and other information inside your system. So this can be another tool in your toolkit that allows you to basically record activity in your system, log the data, audit, and create audit trails about who's seeing what. Because when they come through this Xbasic or this web service, you're going to know who kind of called it, what system did, what maybe user behind that system, etc. So you can use it as another tool in your toolkit to say who's seen your data. So it's really critical in a lot of applications and very, very important. And one thing you'll see in a few minutes, it's not too hard to set up from there. So what we're going to do is kind of dive into our development environment and go ahead and add the ability to authenticate a web service, or I'm sorry, to build on authentication and do the auditing there. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump over into my development environment and make sure you're okay, Dave, in terms of audio and stuff like that.
Audio and video are just fine, thank you.
Okay, cool. I'm going to go slow mouse so we don't overwhelm the network or anything like that from there. So we'll go in our Alpha Webinar system. Service is what we created before. And I'm kind of picking up from last week. So if you missed last week, we'll kind of fill in the blanks. But basically, the very first week, we created a Xbasic class. Let me go ahead and show that real quick. Move this out of the way here. We created this thing for the webinar class. In here, we created a function, and we basically wanted to take that function, which just returned a list of customers from my database, through a web service. So we created this Xbasic class first. We created the function. Neat thing about that is you could start testing it immediately just using Xbasic scripting to make sure it works fine. Then you go to the next step where we went to the web services and we wrapped that in a web service. And then we published it and played with it and showed how you could call it and get the information back. Now, the first time we did it, we basically did it sort of unauthenticated. Basically, anybody who hit that endpoint would see the data. You could just call it, it's like a public API kind of scenario. But then we use this magic button over here called Require Authentication for Selected Methods. We enabled that, and in here we went through a process to say, hey, we've created another little piece of code in Xbasic that does authentication, and this is how you call it. Basically, we said, this is where it's at, this is the method, and how we want to pass information to it. I'm not going to go through all that because it's recorded. You can get a copy of that. You'll be good to go from there. Then once I created that, I could actually go into any of my methods here, and I could authenticate it and tell it which method I want to do from there. So very important about that, and I don't know if I stressed it last week, is we created authentication methods at the top level for this whole web service. And you can actually have multiple authentication methods. I'm not sure why you would, but you know, who knows? You may need that down the road. And then you can pick and choose which of your endpoints or functions within your Xbasic class you can authenticate. So if let's say you had 10 different functions in here, you could actually say, hey, some are protected, some aren't. So you're not required to protect everything, because you may want to have certain ones where people can make queries against it as public data, and then another set of APIs where the only way they get through is through authentication. And so, again, last week we went through how we define that, how we define the class, and go from there. Now what I want to do is extend this. So you'll notice we have a second button here called Audit the API. And what this does when I click on it, it allows me, very similar to authentication methods, I can create one or more audit methods, which means I can connect it to a little piece of code that will be run by the system when anybody hits that endpoint, and one that I want to audit, and allows me to record their data. So let's go ahead and click here and click Define Audit Method. Okay? So it's saying very similar here. It's got a lot of instruction information here. You can define which class matter and the implementation. So it's kind of a chicken and egg. So one thing I'm going to do first, I'm going to grab this and I'm going to copy this to the clipboard. Okay? And actually it's a whole class it's showing, but I'm just going to grab this function because I just need this function right here. Okay? So I'm going to click, actually, and so I'm going to, again, copy this to the clipboard, and I'm going to close it and click OK. And I'm going to get out of here. Because what I need to do is I'm going to go in here back to my Xbasic classes, and I'm going to create a new class in here, and I'm going to use that sample code for that class. So I go here. You notice I'm in the Xbasic area. I click New.
Oh,
I
you'll need
click
to slow down
Xbasic
just
class.
a bit while GoToWebinar catches up to your screen. But you're not far behind,
Oh,
I'll let you know.
interesting. Okay, no
It's a
problem.
little bit, those hamsters running on that wheel.
There you go.
It looks like it's about to say new Xbasic file type, but it hasn't yet come up. And now
Yeah, I'll just hold right here until it catches up. You'll see it flash a couple times.
Xbasic class, okay.
And then once I do there, in a moment, you should see a empty screen here.
It's grooming.
Sorry, guys. It's just have to use a hotspot of all things here. So when you
is
get
that what's
to
going on? Yeah, okay. Yep. This is so you've just clicked on create a new Xbasic script. And
actually Xbasic class. Oh, did I click script? I should have done. You'll see in a moment, it'll catch up. It'll say new Xbasic file type, and I've got my mouse over create a new Xbasic class.
Okay. I'll let you know when you're there. We're just about there.
It's slow, man.
Wow, that is slow.
Well, I'm starting moving the screens around a lot.
You're not in a van down by the river, are you, by any chance? Is that
yeah, exactly. A Unabomber.
All right. At this point, your mouse is hovering over create a new Xbasic class. Yep.
Okay. And in a moment, when it refreshes, you'll see we're in a new class scenario there. And you'll see it basically puts in some blue text at the top. It kind of gives you some information about how to build and set up this class.
Yep, that just appeared. Mm-hmm.
All right. So I'm just going to take that code that I created, and I'm just going to paste it right in there.
Okay, there it is.
Okay. So this is your defaulted structure. And you'll notice that in this class, you have two functions. I'm just going to expand them a little bit so they're a little easier to read. You have one called begin audit and another called end audit. So it actually gives you 2 points at which you can grab log data. Like before, like when it first starts to call that API, you can grab that and then do something there. And then also once it's done, then it can wrap things up. I'm only going to focus on the done one for today because that's, we'll keep it simple today. And you'll notice that it's a very simple, it's basically a function. So you can do anything you want in there. And there are things that are passed into it. For instance, what method name and what milliseconds are putting in there. You'll see it has this little thing called arg dot and arg dot. So what happens is when someone calls the API goes, oh, it's audited, and here's where I send this information. It sends a set of information over to this API, and then it allows you in this function to do what you want to do. And what's cool is you can pass like parameters and other things like that. So it's very flexible from that standpoint. So I'm going to keep it pretty simple. The only thing I'm going to change is I want my log information to go in a certain folder on my system. Now, I'm hard coding this right here. You may want to write that to a database table. You can do that using just Xbasic, SQL action generator, which actually is kind of nice because when it's in a database, it's easy to search, sort, and things like that. This, in this case, is just going to append a file on the hard drive to do it. Now, FYI, that's fine, but if you go to Alpha Cloud or something like that, you may not want to do like file-based type stuff. You may want to insert it in a database so you can read it elsewhere, etc. Up to you. But the bottom line is that once I've created this class, I will in a moment associate it with the API. So when it gets full, it's going to call this here. So I'm going to go ahead and click Save. And since I already gave it a class name, REST audit, and auditor, I'm going to just leave that information as the file name. So it's just going to use that to create the file name for me. And then once I'm good to go, I can click Save. And now I've added that new class into my system. Now that said, I'm adding a new class here, but you can take these audit functions and add it to a different class. I mean, again, we tell the web service environment where to go find these functions. So for instance, when I did the Authenticate one last week, I actually added those functions right into my core Xbasic class. So I don't have to have like 20 classes. I can have one. Now, there is a benefit by doing something like this, which means you could then, when you create, like over time, your system will get more complicated. You don't clutter up your classes. You have like one class that does sort of auditing functionality, another class that does,
Like
authentication.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then if you have to change it, you just go to one place and you can change it there. So it's not buried with your other stuff. So you have your functional stuff like, return customers, things like that in those classes, and then you separate out these. So it's kind of a good idea over time to kind of keep those separated, because then you can kind of use the power of leverage to leverage that single class over it. And you can also take it and move it from project to project. So let's say next week you have a new project, you can just grab these classes that are purely focused on authentication, etc., move them to your new project and you're good to go. You don't have to extract them out of the other project's code. So things along those lines. So we've saved that information now. So now I'm going to go back, and this will catch up in a moment. I'm going to go back into my web services. So in a moment, you'll see the screen refresh, and I'll be back at web services. And once that is done that, I'm going to go into my web service that we've already been using called Alpha Webinar.
All right.
And in a moment, once it opens up, I've gone ahead and gone through and opened up the REST API Service Builder, which is where we were a little bit later. And once that shows up, let me know, and then we'll go ahead and do the audit the API part.
We're tantalizingly close. You've already clicked on
that. It's like the Heinz ad, anticipation.
Exactly. If you want to be really clever, you do all this ahead of time and then keep talking.
If I could only record it. If there was only a way to share videos on the internet, let's create a business around that. Okay.
All right. So luckily, we don't have API Service Builder has just come into focus on the screen.
All right. So we've got like 20-second lag. Pretty good. Okay. So as we did last week with authentication, I showed you in a minute, we've got an area called Audit the API. Then once that's done, once I click there in a few moments, it's going to say Define Audit Method. So again, this is your centralized set of methods that can be used across all of your endpoints. So I'm going to click that. And in a moment, you will see we're back to our audit method. And you'll see some help text up top. Kind of talks a little bit more about it, and cool. So once the audit method is set, we can now tell it, and basically all we're doing is kind of putting a pointer in the system to say, hey, this is where you go find the audit function in my system. So once I do, I've got two things I need to outline is the class name in the implementation. So I'm going to go ahead and click class name, and you'll see when it refreshes in a moment, you're going to see we have a list of classes in my system, and that third one is the new one that we just created a few moments called REST Audit Auditor. So again, before with authentication, if you go back last week, I put that actually in my Alpha Webinar, but it's in this REST Audit Auditor there. Okay? And you'll notice then it says implementation Xbasic because it knows it's Xbasic. And we're good to go. So we basically now told the system, hey, this is where you go to find your audit mechanisms. And that's all I have to do here. It's done that part. I click OK. In a moment, my audit the API is selected. My define audit method has been enabled. Now I can actually go into and tell it that I want to audit specific items. Now, last week when we talked about authentication methods, the next step was to go into my endpoints and actually lock them down. You'll see next to where it says customers, when I highlight it, has a little lock icon. That lock icon basically says that the system will attempt to authenticate on this. I've locked it down essentially. Again, you don't have to lock all your API endpoints down there. It's up to you from a business decision. So I'm going to go ahead and double click on that. And I think that's all I need to do. I think it's going to audit everything for me already. I don't actually have to do it at this level. When you set the auditing, it's kind of a top level kind of scenario. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And then in a moment, I'll be back to my REST API service builder. I've got it, and let's give it a test. Now, the way we want to test this is first I'm going to click Save down the lower right. So I want to save all the changes I just made, and it kind of updates everything in the system. Now, as we mentioned before, which is kind of nice, Swagger definition's taking a little while. Everything's a little slow today, including me. So it's all at least consistent across everything there. Oh, okay. I know you wanted to say it wasn't just today either. Come on, you were so close to saying that, weren't you?
It fit my tongue.
Like, yeah, exactly. Bit it so hard that you're bleeding. Okay. So what I want to do is I could go ahead and publish this, go open my web browser, go Postman, all those other things I've shown before. But again, what's nice is I've got this little live test, the API. Now, before I do that, and this may take a moment to catch up, is I'm going to go to my C drive, go into debug, and there's a bunch of stuff in there already. So in a moment, you'll see I've navigated into my C debug, which is where I'm going to put that file of audit information, because I want to come back here and check it out in a few moments. As you can see, there's a bunch of other stuff in there for my other testing, but there's no log file that's associated with this APR, with the audit, and we'll see that hopefully in a few moments. Now, as we mentioned last week, to test this, actually last couple of weeks, all I have to do is click Live Test the API, and what that will do is I can actually just test it right away. I don't have to go publish or do anything else. I can just do that. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Live Test the API. I need to start up my server because it's going to run the server in the background. So we'll let that do its thing. So bear with me. And in a moment, and it may take a moment to catch up, it's going to launch a web browser window, and it's going to put up my my test environment. Now, actually, it's going to flash for a minute. I need to go look something. I forgot what my authentication was.
Details.
I know it is. Super secret. Okay. So I'm going to wait. When it gets back to the Alpha Webinar Service Endpoint screen, let me know, and we can go ahead and do that. So again, I've locked this API endpoint down, so I need to actually use a secret password. It's called super secret to unlock it to be able to run it. Otherwise, it's not even going to let anything happen from there.
Excellent. I am looking at the Web Projects Control Panel at the moment.
Yeah, it's catching up slowly but surely.
It'll get there. And I'm back at the Alpha Web Service, Alpha Webinar Service Endpoints.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I just had to go in and look at my super secret password, which is super secret. So I'm going to click on the little button on the right to authorize this. That's like the green button with a, and you'll notice that. So we'll go ahead. You'll notice that it's saying what it is. So I'll put it in here and I'll click authorize. Yep. And it is authorized it like that. And so you notice now it's going to be, when it closes that window in a few moments, you'll see that the authorize now has like a little lock symbol next to it saying that it knows what my authorization is. So now what happens is, part of the testing interface, anytime I call any of the API endpoints, it's going to pass that that authorization information along with it. So I don't have to keep re-entering it over and over and over again. And so you'll notice that it is locked. It's got this lock thing. So I'm going to click Get. I'll scroll down. And in a moment, you'll see it's going to show me default. Again, this is just getting a list of customers, so it's no parameters. And it's expecting a response of 200 here. So we'll go ahead and try it out. So I click that button, try it out. And in a moment now, you'll see a new button appears called Execute, which says, okay, everything's ready to go. I've got your authorization. I know what endpoint you want to exercise. If there were parameters that I need to pass in, like I was doing filtering, something like that, it would ask me for those parameters. So I could put them in here when I did the testing to make sure. And again, that's why we talk about Postman. Postman's a much better environment for doing, testing and saving that data, etc. So definitely investigate that from there. Now I'm going to go ahead and click Execute. In a moment, you'll see it goes loading because it's basically running against my system. It's then running a query against the database. And I'm going to scroll down a little bit, and you'll see in a moment which it catches up. You see it's giving me a server response code on the left side of the screen, and that says 200, which is which means like everything went A-OK. And then on the right-hand side of the screen, when it catches up, you'll see the response body, which is what my Xbasic class actually generated. It called the database, created a set of JSON with customer data, and sent it back as the payload, as the information request body, or response body, excuse me, response. Request is to me, response is back as that from that standpoint there. So again, nothing super, duper. You've seen that before. But let's go now check our folder, and we should see a, what do we call that? Was it REST? A new file. Okay. I'm going to open that actually in another thing. You'll see it'll flash from you, but I went back and you're going to see a new file called REST, R-E-S-T, in that folder that was not there before. And you can go back and rewind the tape if you don't trust me on that, but I didn't just, this thing's working so fast, I actually copied it in there just to say, But you'll notice in a moment, you'll see, and I open it up once, twice, because of course, why not open it twice?
Yeah.
But in a moment, you'll see my Notepad++, which, by the way, I love that program.
There it is.
It's phenomenal.
Notepad++.
I use it all the time.
Is that your?
Yeah. And you'll see in there, there's a little log that says customers took 2406 milliseconds. So I'll go back and show you in a minute. I don't want to jump around too much because of the speed issue, but it's basically recording what API endpoint and how long it took. So, 2.4 seconds to get that data back. It's a little slow, but I'm on my development machine, yada, 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 yada.
And you would put that function, if I recall, there were two functions. There's one that audits it at the beginning, and there's one that audits it at the end. So you must have put it at the end one, correct? Otherwise,
yeah, because otherwise I wouldn't know how long.
Yeah, exactly. I see. So that's kind of important. Yep.
And what's really cool about this too is that it's a performance monitoring tool. I mean, you can sit there and you can see how many queries per hour you're getting. I mean, if you store all this data, you can mine the logs to say, how many requests am I getting? What's the average time of request? You could say, hey, maybe I need to bump up my machine, or maybe set a separate, machine to do these things. So it just, again, it's both a security tool, but also a performance tool because it allows you to really check these things out. Now I'm going to run back in, and I'm going to execute it again, and I'm going to execute it again, and I'm going to execute it again. So I've executed it 3 times. Take a moment to see it. It did go a lot faster this time, I'm sure, because it did something. We'll see. And then when we're done from there, I'm going to reload and open up my my information here. So you'll see in a moment after I executed it 4 times, and I'm going back into my flat file and seeing the log entries, and you'll see there are now 4 log entries. And I think what's really fascinating is, check that out, a lot faster. I mean, we're talking much shorter amount of time for return. I'll give you my theory.
We'll have to let you know in a minute when we can see it. But
yeah, I know. Actually,
but I believe you. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, much faster. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty impressive. I mean, good data to know. Now, my theory, everybody, is that the database has cached that query, and so it's just respitting it back out. I think it's really being the database more than anything else that is, I think there's probably a little compile time maybe on the alpha side. First time you call that, it's doing some housekeeping, getting everything set up. So there's less of that, but also I think more importantly, the database has got that view data, and it just says, you just asked for that. I'll just give you back what I gave you a few moments ago. I'll have to run that in there from that. So I'm not going to spend much more time, but as you can see, it's really simple to implement. We give you a basic out-of-the-box class to go and put into there. You add that class, you say audit it, and then from then on, you're going to be able to measure how fast things are going. You can add your own information in those things, like more data that you want to surround each call, and also you can, of course, put it into, say, a database versus a log file.
So there's a lot of flexibility in terms of how you implement it. And that was one of the key things that the development team wanted to do was, one size doesn't fit all. So they said, well, okay, we're basically going to put in the hooks and give you samples, and then it's up for you to kind of roll your own in terms of how you want to do authentication. Because there are different, some people are using Active Directory, some people are using built-in alpha, other people want to roll their own. Some people want to create authentication keys. There's many different ways to do it. So instead of creating one size fit all, this is the structure. So it's a little bit more to get your head around at the beginning, just because you kind of have to understand the mechanisms and how it's put up, because it is very, very flexible. But once you have your head around it, and the cool thing is once you're done here, you're done, man. You got a new API endpoint. You just say, oh, I'm going to lock it down. Here's my lock-in method. Here's my audit method. And you're off to the races. So think of it as building a foundation for your API environment. Once you have that, everything else goes from there. And works really, really well. And again, all this works great on Alpha Cloud, etc. Again, you may want to not use a file output on Alpha Cloud. Maybe you want to use trace.write lines and trace type tools, because those will go to Alpha's standard logging system, which then you can extract. And I have to tell you something really cool about that too. In the latest release of Alpha Cloud, which was just a week or two ago, they did obviously a lot of really cool performance stuff, but now you can specify that log files are kept in JSON format. So right now, previously, it would spit out text into just standard text, but now you can say save it as JSON. And the cool thing about that is a whole bunch of third-party logging tools, things like New Relic and Datadog, etc. They love ingesting JSON data because then it's already pre-structured and they can put it together really nicely. So I want to give a big hat tip to Kurt, who put that together, because it makes it so much easier to, once you have all these detailed logs, you're going to want to go in and review them. Well, if they're in JSON format to begin with, when they go to the other tools for review, a lot of your work is done. Those tools will automatically identify and show things and do stuff there. So I want to throw that out there real quick to everybody there. So with that, I'm not going to move the mouse. I'm going to open it up for questions. I won't probably be able to do any crazy dynamic video demos, but I want to answer any questions we can have about this topic, and obviously anything else that you may have on your mind.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so let's start here. We already answered the question about the community edition being the full edition.
Yep. Great
okay,
question.
Here's one on the installer. Can the new installer be configured to handle custom folder locations of the Alpha Anywhere application?
Ooh, very, very interesting. I don't know the answer to
Sarah
that question.
probably knows the answer, because I know she's been working a lot with that. So, Sarah, are you there?
Yes.
Okay.
That's also the answer.
That's also the answer. Okay, wonderful. So
not only can you configure it, but the installer tracks everything that you've installed. So there's a page where it'll list all those things in one place. So if you want to update something, it's all right there.
Now,
it's really cool. I like that. I'm sorry.
You've just written a lot of documentation for the Universal Installer, including some tricks on how to install it, even if you don't have an internet connection. You need to put it onto removable media, for example.
Yes.
Could you paste that, when you get a chance, could you paste that into the chat window? Because I think it's actually really very, very good stuff and well written.
Yeah, we call that the CIA feature. Those special organizations, Actually, I think it's for people who have like server environments that you can't punch into remotely. Like, they're super secure for, security for patient data and financial data, that they limit that.
Sure, yeah.
I'm really enjoying it. It's amazing. Even what's cool is that the installer has its own installer built into it. So you notice I launched the Alpha installer, and it's got a little update button, which means, I've got to get a new version of installer before I actually do any installs of Alpha stuff. So again, we'll explore it in a lot more detail, but loving it. It's just one less thing to worry about of having to go to a website, download, do all that stuff. And it remembers what you've installed, as Sarah was saying, so you can see kind of where it installed stuff, you can say refresh this. Very, very, very slick implementation. Well thought out.
Yep, very cool. So the next question is, what's the trick to getting email SMTPOpen, that's the Xbasic function called email SMTPOpen to play nicely with Office 365 and their mail system.
Ooh,
I don't know the
interesting.
answer offhand, but I do know that we have a variety of email commands, and my experience has been sometimes the one that I'm using doesn't work with a particular email service provider. And there are some other ones. Sarah, would it be possible for you to open the documentation on your screen and sort of take us on a little
Yeah.
tour of the stuff that's available for email?
Yeah.
Awesome. Let me go ahead
Yeah.
and make you the
And
presenter.
while she's doing that, I found the number one trick is ports. When you do the SMTP, almost all of them move to secure SSL ports and stuff like that.
Right.
And it's a mix of your username, password, and then what port do you hit. So you have to look at the documentation of the email provider, and they'll say like port 25 or this other port. If you don't have that right, then it kind of bounces. So the important thing is kind of knowing exactly for the provider what ports and stuff they want to see things on and where you'll call it. Because we'll default it to a certain port, but that may not be the right port for what that service provider requires.
Interesting. So,
do I need to change the presenter, or can you do that?
Oh, no, Sarah's already showing her screen.
Yep, gotcha. And now it's my turn to be on the other side.
Now it's your turn to be slow.
Sarah,
Right,
put the screen up. God, taking forever. Gosh, jeez.
So are there any email functions in particular that you would like to point out, or just?
Well, to be honest, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sarah.
So for sending email, email SMTP, close, open, and send are your kind of like the lowest level that you can use to send email. But we do have a few built-in things that make it easier to use services like SendGrid and SparkPost. There's also this email send no pro. I think this is the right one. Send no profile. Yeah. So this email send no profile is actually like just the top level big picture kind of function that uses those SMTP functions internally, but we've simplified.
Wrapped them, and you made it more simple. Cool.
Yeah.
And I know the one for Gmail works very well too, and it's best to use the Gmail specific function if you're using Gmail as your email
if you're using Gmail. To address the question that was asked, I would actually maybe recommend trying to use this function because without knowing why your email is failing, it's hard to figure that out. So send no profile actually does give you back error text. So that would be worth looking into.
Oh,
and notice the first line. It says right there, the port 465. But again, it depends on your provider, and they'll move it around for security bases and things like that.
Gotcha. Right. And this person said they're using.
I'm kind of partial.
Yeah.
I know some people have to use their own servers and stuff, but I'm really partial to like SparkPost and SendGrid, just because they work really nicely. They're fast, and you get a lot of reporting on those systems. They're pretty cool, and you can add things like templates and stuff. Really cool systems.
Very cool. So back to one more installer question here. Let me just grab it. Is it easy to use the new installer for multiple installs of different builds? For example, I want to try out the pre-release, but use the development one.
Yes.
So the answer is yes. It does let you do that.
I wanted to show you guys this. I'm going to steal Dion's thunder.
Excellent.
This is what I've got installed
Thunder stolen.
right now. When I'm talking about
not very
versions.
hard to do that.
Yeah, so this is developer edition. This one's been installed in Alpha Anywhere in my program files. Here's my application server for IIS. Here's the standard application server. Oh, I'm on the wrong tab. This is what we can install here. So this is what you can install. This is available. I thought I was on the other one. So you can do the developer edition, server for IIS, application server, which is the classic server, and then your runtime for your desktop users out there. All this stuff here, when you install, is configurable. You can go through more options or just click change. We have stable build. We have nightly builds. Every single build in here is.
But never unstable build for some reason.
Never unstable build. No, we have no unstable builds now.
We only have unstable developers, not unstable builds.
And there's a third one here. It's called preview build. We're not using it yet.
I was about to say, how's that different than nightly? But it must be one that we're keeping around that isn't the nightly one?
No, so the new workflow is going to be we have nightly builds every day.
Yep.
And if we feel like they're okay to put out there for people to test on, like they don't have any blatant problems, we'll put them out there, and you can just, it's the same as the pre-release. We've just called it nightly now. And you can, it's always going to list the latest one. We had one this morning.
Yep.
So once we pick a build that we think is ready to ship, the idea is it's going to become a preview build. And then that will give people the ability to test these out to see if it's working for them. And then once a preview build is approved, it will become a stable build.
Okay. So
And,
preview is almost like the beta and almost like a release candidate beta.
Basically, yeah, that's what a preview. It's a release candidate. We're using
Okay.
the word preview. And then in here, you'll have access to all stable builds and pre-release / nightly builds back to April 30th of last year. Anything older, you'll have to go through the old installer if you need to roll back. But it's really easy to pick stuff. If you want to install on a different location, you just pick another location. And then
All right,
once that's all
I have to
installed.
ask you, what is Oracle Instant Client? And
Okay, if you are using Oracle as a database, I believe that's the client to connect with it.
Oh, I see. So it
Yeah.
installs the extra piece that you need. Okay.
Yeah. And if you find out you need it and you forgot to install it, there's a modify option, and you can say include it, and that will update it for you. This install tab is everything I've got installed. I've got a nightly build of the developer edition, nightly build of IIS, stable build is the app server, a stable build of the developer edition, another nightly build of the developer edition. These are all in different folders.
And they're all in different folders, and you can see what folders they're in, right? Right.
You
from
can
the,
see what the folder that it's in. If I
yeah.
want to update any of these, I just click update, agree, and
Yeah,
look at
that is so cool.
Wow.
And that's
And
going
if
to update to the latest.
Yep.
And it does install on your start menu a specific launch point, so you don't have to go in here to launch it. So some nice things.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I like
Sarah,
launching
I did have a
because
question.
it's all in one spot.
Yeah.
Sarah, I did have a question. When you're working with Windows Me, how do you use that with this installer?
Windows Me support ended a very long time ago. That is not a supported operating system.
From 2000? Yeah, I don't think so, man.
You need to upgrade, sir.
That was my favorite release of all time, Windows Me.
Really?
It was a winner.
Well, yeah. Microsoft Bob is my other one.
Yeah. So all that
Clippy.
in that link I pasted in the chat, it's literally just a link to the how-to section, but you'll find here at the top there's an installation section now, and this is going to have more stuff in it soon. But all of these are going to tell you go download the installer. You click that download, it's going to download it. You only have to do this once, and then once that installer is downloaded, you run it. It will actually then copy itself over into your program files directory. So if you ever lose it, it's going to be in C program files alpha anywhere installer, and that's where you're going to find it.
Yep.
And we also have a separate version called the Community Edition. That's just a simplified version that just installs the Developer Edition, because the Community Edition doesn't include the standalone server and runtime in it. So
yeah, it's for
that's
newbies.
just to reduce confusion for you.
Yeah, it's for newbies, right? Who are going, what is this runtime thing and all that? So
but
all of us here in the call are clever enough to pull one. Yeah. Now, could you show once again how you can see the different folder for each of the installations? So in other words, if a person wanted to go and look on their hard drive, can you show where that's listed? It's right underneath the build, right?
Yeah, so in each one of these, it's going to show you where it's been installed.
Yep.
For existing users who have existing installs, the first time you launch the universal installer, it's going to search your system for what is installed.
Huh.
And it's only going to find what you most recently installed. So if you have multiple installs of Alpha Anywhere, it's not going to pick all of them up. And that's just because of how the old installer registered those things. But if you update those, once they're updated and you've done it with the universal installer, it will know about them, and then they'll be listed in your installed tab.
That is fantastic. Someone asked, is there a way that Alpha could make the release as a DLL so that they can update their server without having to stop the server? And
I read that question. I think they're asking if they can stop a DLL from running to update it while Alpha is still running, and there are ways to do it, but it is rife with peril. Because of how DLLs work, there's no way to tell Alpha to stop using it. And if you kill it using other methods, Alpha may still have all those objects, and it could lead to unexpected behaviors and crash your system.
Gotcha. Thank you. Oh, does the latest release include the built-in list filters for each column in the list?
Yes.
And if so, where can that be found? Oh, look at this.
I believe those are the list column actions that they're asking about. They're in the documentation. They're actually released a while ago, but
Oh, okay.
I forgot to add this page, and this was updated recently. So
Okay, well,
now
that's fair if they couldn't find it.
I
Would you
apologize.
mind taking that share link and pasting that into the
Absolutely, yeah.
chat
I'll put
window
that in there
for the
for
person who
everyone.
asked it?
Try it
And
out, and then I believe
So,
everything in the new release is already in there.
so, all right. And now question 2 is, what do the built-in list filters do?
Built-in list filters. So these
Yeah.
little filter things at the top here, they look like yellow highlighted. That's not what the icon
Filters.
actually looks like. They
Oh,
look
okay.
like filters.
Okay.
What they do is they just provide a way to quickly select options or search for things and filter your list. So typing in here AM, it's going to show you everything that contains AM. Equals is like an exact match, I think.
Mhm.
So you've got these 4 operations up here. Those are your equals, not equals, contains, and does not contain. And it's just a way to quickly filter the list or provide a way to filter these lists based on values in the column.
Cool. Oh, very cool. Thank you. Let me find another one.
Yeah, slowly but surely, that grid is, all the features that are capable in a grid are in the list control pretty close.
Yeah, it really is getting there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
which is
the one you mentioned earlier, the fixed columns, that's this. These columns are fixed; they don't move now, so you can do horizontal navigation, kind of like in Excel.
When you freeze a pane
freeze those
or
columns.
sheet. Yeah.
Yep.
Let me see. Wow, you know what? I think this might be the day that we got to the end of our questions. Can't believe that's happened. All right, all good.
It's a Christmas miracle.
It's a Christmas miracle. All right, we have, by my calculations, 150 seconds left in this webinar. So if you've got a question, I'll go look through to make sure I didn't miss any, but you can go ahead and type them in if it's a quick one. Well, it looks like we answered all the questions. Cool. Hey, Dion, thank you very much.
Hey, thank you.
Good luck finding a quicker internet connection, by the way. That's
Yeah, it helps to pay your bills.
oh,
I'm working on that.
Oh, Dion, the check's in the mail, man. Don't worry about it. We got you.
Yeah.
Sarah, thank you very much for all of your help and all of your explanations. Thanks everyone for showing up today. If you do have further questions, please go ahead and send them to guides, GUIDES, @alphasoftware.com. Thanks again for joining us. We hope to see you at our next Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. Take care and stay well. Bye-bye.